in explaining to you how in the very first verse of the Rig Veda, the word Purohit is defined. And now we're going to the next stage. Since a Purohit does as one of his duties, the performance of sanskaras, so now we understand what we mean by sanskara. So often when we talk of sanskar, we define the sanskar as the 16 rites, Garbhadhan, Simantonnayan, Punsavanam, and going on, Jat Karma, marriage ceremony, all of that ending with Antyashti. But, to just look at sanskar and understand by the word sanskar that we only mean rites or rituals will then not give us a full impact of what sanskar really means. So we have to look at the definition of the word sanskar and see what its root, its philosophical base is. So if you look at the website and you just glance through some simple definitions, then you will get words like, mental impressions. You get the word psychological imprints. Then there's the word tendencies and subliminal impressions. Now, what do we mean by all of these? We are looking now at the word sanskar even before we start talking about the 16 sanskars. The word sanskar then embodies these ideas or concepts that a sanskara is a mental impression. They are recollections of whatever we gather by way of information. This information then becomes what we call psychological imprints. They become embedded in our psychology. And then they translate or become tendencies, the manner in which we carry ourselves, we behave. And the word subliminal impressions mean it becomes rooted, deep rooted, and a part of our psyche. So these sanskaras are just not the performance of the rituals or ceremonies. It's all about life and how we gather and imbibe all these impressions because they become our being. So the word again for sanskar is, we say, it is a process of refinement. The word refine is very important because you look at dictionaries and often when there's sanskar, you'll find the word refinement. And refinement meaning towards achieving purity or perfection. It's a process. Refinement is a process. For example, you talk about refined sugar or refined oil. So refined means there's a process, a continual or a continuous process by which we refine ourselves. Refine also has, if you look at the word re as a prefix to refine, then we also think of words like redo, revise, re as in repeat. So it is a process. Refinement is a process like the re, the important prefix re, redo. So repeat. So it is a process which by repeating takes us towards a perfection and a purity. Right? Now, look at some of the words that we have. Sanskara. Now, before I go into a deeper meaning of the word sanskara, look at the word sanskari. So a person that has got sanskaras in him or in her, a person that carries, himself or herself with the dignity, with the decorum. that has good tendencies, good behavior, good mannerisms, we say such a person is sanskari. So we talk of sanskari putra, sanskari putri, sanskari ma, sanskari bahu. Right? So all of these sanskari here is an adjective that is used to describe a person who has all this good conduct. Then we come across the word Sanskrit. Sanskrit then means a language. And if a language is refined, in other words, through the ages, through the centuries or through the millennia, that language has been refined and further perfected, then we say such a language is Sanskrit. It is a refined language. Then from the word Sanskrit, we get the word Sanskriti. Sanskriti leads up from Sanskara, Sanskari, Sanskrit, the language that contains or gives us or serves as our authority for our Sanskriti. Our Sanskriti, simple translation, is our culture, our values, our dance, our music, our language, and most important, the culture that embodies or contains in it all those beautiful values and virtues that we live up to. So please do remember the word Sanskara, Sanskari, Sanskrit, and Sanskriti as all being related terms. So then going a little bit further into the word Sanskara, it's made up of two parts, Sanskara. Now, the second part, Kara, is got from the root Kri, right? Karya, Karyam. Kri means to do. So, Kara then means all that we do, the deeds that we perform is called Karya, Kara. Kri, Karya, Kara, that which we do. Now, prefix to that, added in front of that, is Sanskara. Sanskara, if you know the English word sum, S-U-M, sum, then you'll understand the meaning of Sanskara. Sum means a total. When you add something all together, you get a sum. Now, that English sum comes from the Sanskrit sum, and sum therefore means complete or replete, something that is complete or replete or refined, like we said. So, Sanskara then is the sum total or the aggregate, the sum total of impressions, right? As I explained to you earlier, impressions, that which is part of our psyche, our mind, our psychology. These impressions, a sum total or an aggregate of it, that determines my personality, my very being. These are then, what the sanskara, the word sanskara is grounded in. This is the preface to understanding your 16 rites. And by the 16 rites, the sanskaras, again, that meaning you all know, the 16 rituals or ceremonies that we perform, they are called the rites of passage. And it means, a passage means a journey. So along this journey, each time when you come to a crossroad of life, like you have a garment, even that garment has to have a destination. And when you set the destination, if you know what your destination is in life, if you set your destination as a realization of the deeper meaning of the living of a life that leads you to a realization of what we are all about, then that garment is at each crossroad is going to tell you what direction you should follow. And this is the job of the sanskars. at each of these crossroads, it tells you how you move forward, which direction you take so that you will reach your destination. So having discussed this, I hope you have a better understanding of the word sanskar and the kind of philosophy that it is grounded in. Right? The ceremonies are adibhotik, what we perform, right, as ceremonies, as rituals, but the adhyatmic meaning, atma, related to one's soul and one's being, is where sanskar has its greatest significance and its philosophical meaning. Now, I want to take you through some pages of a book called Creation and Nature, a book that I've done. It's a little booklet. This booklet starts off by explaining to us, it's called Creation and Nature. And if you look at these pages now, the very beginning of the book, and the pages talk from the beginning about a creation that you and I are all a part of. So if you look at the first page, and I hope you will try and get a copy of this book. If you look at the very beginning of the book, as the title suggests, we look at why we have come up with the word creation. So we talk about how creation is a concept that human beings think about. So here you are. And the concept of creation is a human thing because human beings think. And if you look at the world, and if you think about creation, then we think about who we are, how we've come into being, and then we start thinking about a greater creation, that we are in sync or in harmony with a greater, creation. And we look and appreciate the wonder and the splendor of all of this. And then as human beings, we begin to think about what lies beyond it. And religions in particular have been always perplexed by death. What is the purpose of living? Why should we be born? Why should we die? So we then start speculating, and we want to go beyond the physical to find out, is there something beyond this physical world? Is there something that is eternal? So human beings are the only ones. You do not find the animals and the birds sitting and thinking about these things. So if you look at the next page of this book again, then it takes us further into the hierarchy, which is what we're talking about. Right? We assume that in this hierarchy of creation, in this hierarchy of, we presume as human beings that we are on the high, not only in Hinduism, but in most religions. Whether we live up to it or not, that's another matter. Often we as human beings, we say we are the highest in this order of creation. We don't live up to it by what we do. All right? So if you look at it, then we talk about this creation, and then we say the entire creation, from the tiniest living being to the largest of creation, the huge whales, everything is permeated by some spiritual entity, by some kind of consciousness. So we have to look at creation and see that when you look at the hierarchy, in other words, you look at the smallest forms of existence, the single cells, and as we go up from the plankton to the higher forms of life, we ultimately come to the animal on the one side and the human being on the other side. So when it comes to that, many ways we are the same, the animal and the human. We are afraid, we hunt, we eat, we procreate, we experience pain and happiness, we protect our young, and we live in families, or in the case of animals, in packs, and we actually mark our territories. Yeah, even when we have countries and names, the earth doesn't come with all those territories marked out. We make them and we mark them out. Very much like animals do, they mark the territories. So now what is the difference then? So if you look at the next, we talk of the ladder of life, and in this ladder of life, right, our genes play a great part. So our DNA, right? And then do we have a hand in determining this? So look at the next page, and it says that ultimately then we spoke about the human beings on one side and the animal on the other side, and the word we have then is Manu and Pashu, right? So if you take Manu and Pashu, the word Manu comes from the root man, manyate, to think. Now, because we can think, remember three things, right? We can think, we have the capacity to think. So we are defined when we call ourselves humans, or we call ourselves man, not necessarily male, but as a species, if you are man, man manyate, number one, we have the capacity to think. Because we have the capacity to think, number two, we make choices in everything that we do. Even if we breathe, we can decide to breathe gently, or we can get agitated and breathe fast. So in everything, we choose. So we make a choice, capacity to think, then we make a choice, and third part is we take responsibility for whatever we choose. Now, against that is Pashu. Right? Now, Pashu means, the word Pashu or Pasha means one who is bound. Bound why? A bird like the weaver bird can do nothing. There's a microchip, not a bigger microchip than we can ever make, that is implanted in its brain, right? Which we call instinct. Basically, we don't know how it happens. That microchip, we do not know how it comes there, but the weaver bird will make its nest like any other weaver bird. And nobody teaches it. It does it automatically. A salmon that is born in a river will go, mind you, fresh water. It'll go into a sea that is salty water. Leagues it will swim, but it'll come back to the same spot and spawn and die. The bee, every cell, without learning maths and engineering, is made the same. So we do not know how these things work, and therefore we call it instinct, which really means that we do not know. But now, what about a human being? In a human being, now this is where we come to our sanskaras. In a human being, the instinct is minimal. Maybe when a baby is born, it automatically, instinctively suckles. Right? But for the rest, if you take a baby, a human baby, and leave it amongst monkeys, what will happen? It will become like a Tarzan, jumping around from tree to tree, screaming and yelling like a monkey. If you leave it amongst dogs, that baby will slowly grow up barking and walking on all fours like a dog. So therefore, for the human being, you have to have a structured society, structured rules, discipline, and education, which is what sanskar means. Without the sanskar, then there is no difference between Manu and Pashu. Yeah? So it's very important to understand these two terms, Manu and Pashu. the one being bound by instinct, having no say in what it does. It will build its home. A swallow will build its mud nest without any training, without any schooling. It comes naturally, instinctively. Human beings can't live their lives on instinct. There has to be a process of education, of discipline, right, of a structured society in which a human being grows. All right. So now let's take this one step further and look at the words. We'll look at the word manu a little bit more. And like I explained to you, the word man manyate is where we get the word man from. And if you look at the word Suman, right? If we add the prefix su to man, Suman, right? Then the meaning of Suman is one who has a good mind, right? So having a mind is one thing, making those decisions, right? Making those choices, and then taking responsibility for it is one. But the next part is having Suman. Su means good, Sukarya, good deeds, Sudharma, a good dharma. And Suman is a good mind. So a mind that is endowed with virtues, with charity, with compassion. We therefore then say that is Suman. And if you take Suman, and if you take a linguistic patterns where the S changes to H, like Sindhu becomes Hindu, Sapta meaning 7 becomes Hapta, Hapta, Sapta, Sindhu, Hindu. Just like that, Suman became human. Right? So human, therefore, when we say to somebody, you must be human, it means that we must have a mind that is endowed with charity, compassion, love, sharing, and caring. So remember, and it is because we have this ability to think, we have to plot this journey of life. And this journey of life consists of sanskaras, whether you are literally performing a ritual or you're stopping at the crossroads of life. And each time assessing, evaluating, and then taking your next part, that is deciding on your way forward in this journey of life. That is called sanskar. And these sanskars then become together all those, like we said, impressions, psychological tendencies, your tendencies of your behavior, and your some aggregate, right, of who we are, our very inner being, and what we are made up of. That then is the greater picture of sanskars, the background against which we perform our rites and rituals. Right. Thank you very much for that. I think we have a minute or two, and Lekha's done her recording, so we can take some comments and questions.